Story 1. 120 miles per hour average speed in a hatchback Honda Prelude in 1988 or 1989. We made it to Las Vegas in just about 3 hours from Los Angeles, which is normally a 5 to 5.5 hour drive. Story 2. You do not know the feeling of speed until you hit 90 miles per hour in your 10-year-old Ford Escort because you were not paying attention until the car started violently shaking. Story 3. Mach 1 plus. Back seat of a Hornet when the pilot gave me control briefly. Estimated time of arrival. Never mentioned where. Above the Arizona desert as the bad guy against 2 F-16 fighter jets from Luke Air Force Base. Story 4. 219 kilometers per hour in a 1995 Dodge Spirit. Downhill on a divided highway when I was still a teenager. The car literally could not go any faster. Edit to add. Story 5. 200 kilometers per hour on the Autobahn. We probably could have gone faster, but we were stuck in a Chevrolet Cruze because my friend could not drive a manual transmission, and that was the only automatic car the rental company had. Story 6. I was in the passenger seat of a borrowed Porsche 911 Turbo, around 1999 or 2000. My friend, then a professional rally driver and now a professional rally commentator, was at the wheel. There is literally nobody in the world I trust more to drive me in any situation or circumstance. I was watching the speedometer while he watched the road. We hit 185 miles per hour, nearly 300 kilometers per hour. What most people don't know about the 911 Turbo is that at about 170 miles per hour, the turbo dumps fuel into the exhaust, which ignites and causes fire to blow out the tailpipe until you drop back down under the turbo threshold. Suddenly, the trees lining the empty 2 a.m. freeway were flashing bright yellow from our exhaust pyrotechnics, and we both immediately thought it was police lights, though they would never catch us. He shut it down hard, and we celebrated our high score. Story 7. 118 miles per hour on a Kawasaki Ninja 250. It was absolutely the top speed. There was a police officer sitting on the side of the road. I zoomed past him and thought I would keep going. If I got caught, I got caught. But he did not pursue. I was 18 and stupid. I would never do that again. Story 8. 160 miles per hour BMW M850i. It was not even that scary. Jail time would have been. Never do that again. Interstate 40 West. Waze was reliable, and the interstate was empty and straight. Story 9. I'm guessing around 260 kilometers per hour. A long straight section of a racetrack near me. The speedometer goes to 220. I hit that in 4th gear, grabbed 5th, and held my foot into it until I absolutely had to brake. In a 2001 Holden Commodore. They are not made to go that fast consistently. Story 10. 299 kilometers per hour on my Yamaha YZF R1. After that speed, the speedometer stops counting, but the revolutions per minute keep increasing. Let's say it was on the Autobahn. Story 11. 140 miles per hour in a 73 Plymouth Satellite on a freeway late one night in 1985. Outside of Louisville, Kentucky. Story 12. 105 in a 1962 Plymouth Belvedere. This was in 1979. I was late coming home, and my father was very strict. I left Boulder, Colorado, at 11:50 p.m. and arrived at my home in Broomfield, Colorado, 10 minutes later. I came in, and my dad was asleep in his chair, so it would not have made any difference. Story 13. Sketchiest. 134 miles per hour. 1966 Mustang. The front end started to lift off the ground. Fastest. 157 miles per hour. Buick Turbo Regal. Hit a fuel cut and backed off. Story 14. 180 kilometers per hour Holden Commodore VN. She could not go any faster. I was much younger and less experienced back then. It was midnight on a highway with no one around. Story 15. The fastest I have gone was 145 miles per hour in my first car, a 2003 Toyota Celica GTS. I lived out in the desert where the roads are long. I passed 3 stop signs and decided to stop at the next one. Luckily, I did because a police officer was driving by. I was 16, and I have not really broken the law like that in a car since then. Story 16. About 150 miles per hour on Interstate 95 South in a Porsche 911 Turbo and 197 miles per hour on a Suzuki Hayabusa in a standing mile race at an abandoned airfield in North Carolina. Story 17. 161 miles per hour in my 2019 392 Hemi Challenger. I was at the top of fifth gear at 160 miles per hour with one more gear to go until a tractor 3/4 of a mile away pulled out in front of me. Story 18. A race-built motorcycle reached at least 233 miles per hour at an event for flat-out speed runs. Telemetry data was not verified beyond that, and a spectacular wreck ended the run shortly afterward. Story 19. 229 kilometers per hour in my 1999 Saab 9-5 3.0-liter V6. I was casually driving at this speed when a Porsche 911 absolutely zoomed past me at over 300 kilometers per hour. I live in Germany, so it was on the Autobahn. Story 20. 298 kilometers per hour in a Lamborghini Gallardo I rented in the Czech Republic. It only cost $50 for a half hour. The guide took me to a decommissioned runway where I opened it up. He said I had to stop slowing down just as I was going to hit 300 kilometers per hour. When I asked why, he pointed and said we were almost out of runway. On a motorcycle, probably when I went 200 kilometers per hour on a CBR 600RR on a regular empty highway in the prairies. The chance of a deer or gopher coming out scared me enough not to repeat. Story 21. I hit 72 in Wisconsin one time. Otherwise, I like the right lane about 3 miles under the speed limit. I will get there when I get there, and it will always be safely. Story 22. 285 kilometers per hour in my 2009 RX-8 on the freeway in British Columbia heading toward Merritt from Hope on straight paths. I only did it for a moment because a friend asked me how fast it can go. I never did it again as I actually got scared. Those cars are not fast off the line, but once you get over 100 kilometers per hour, they pick up like crazy. I missed that vehicle. I sold it when I started having kids, as keeping it made basically no sense. I have had many sports cars in my life, and the 2009 manual 6-speed RX-8 was by far the most fun to drive in my opinion. Now I have a work pickup truck with 3 car seats in the back. Story 23. 125 is the top speed of my car. The electronics prevent it from going any faster, from what I understand. I have tried, though. Story 24. 125 miles per hour in a newer Corvette. Light work and felt great. Always wanted to reach out to 150 miles per hour plus in a more controlled or at least isolated environment. Story 25. 154 miles per hour Lamborghini Aventador in the Florida Keys on the 7-mile bridge. Could have gone much faster, but there were cars ahead. Story 26. 140 miles per hour. Infiniti Q45. Hit the governor. Car could not go any faster, although the car did not feel like it had much more in it even if it could. I did it over the floating bridge in Seattle. It is the longest floating bridge in the world. Over a mile long. I was the only car on it that night, so it seemed like a good time to be an idiot. Story 27. 2002 Impala. Recently, while driving a 2012 Lincoln MKZ, I did not realize I was going that fast while passing someone. I was at 60 miles per hour when I started and just pushed my foot too far, I guess. I was surprised when I looked down and felt like I was doing 75, but I was actually at 100 miles per hour. Story 28. About 240 kilometers per hour. I couldn't look down at the speedometer anymore because the wind was trying to rip my head off. The bike had no windscreen. Story 29. 136 miles per hour. Mazda MX-5. Very long downhill motorway stretch at 2 a.m. with no other vehicles around. This means, thanks to gravity, I pushed the car beyond its normal top speed, which is cool. Story 30. About 130 miles per hour. Yamaha XS 1100. I was bouncing so much that I could read my speedometer. The person I was racing told me we reached speeds of 130 to 135 miles per hour. Story 31. 155 miles per hour, late at night on a deserted stretch of highway, in a 2012 Porsche Cayenne S. Back when I was younger and less experienced. One deer and I would have been toast. Story 32, 235 kilometers per hour, 2005 BMW M Series in the middle of nowhere, Saskatchewan. Maintained that speed for approximately 20 minutes, which is the wild part. Story 33, 140 miles per hour in an Aston Martin Vantage. Late at night on a mostly empty freeway. That car could have gone much faster, but I did not feel like risking it. Story 34. In a 1995 Volvo 850 Turbo, 132 miles per hour on a remote road at 2 a.m. The car still had a lot more to go, but I asked myself, "What are you doing, old man?" And I slowed down. Story 35. 160 miles per hour in my modified 1994 RX 7 on an empty highway in the middle of the night in the Midwest United States. It still had more to give, but the highway was not especially smooth, and it started feeling unstable at 160 miles per hour. I also reached 160 miles per hour on my old Yamaha R6. Story 36. 275 kilometers per hour or 170 miles per hour in my old 1991 Pontiac Trans Am, going from Rotterdam to the Maasvlakte right around 2 a.m. Story 37. Speedometer indicated 176 miles per hour, probably a fair bit less. I ran out of bravery at that point. The motorcycle probably still had more to go. Kawasaki ZX-10R, tucked in like you would not believe on a very straight private road in the United Kingdom. Story 38. My Benelli 752S can reach 220 kilometers per hour, maybe a little more, but that is too dangerous for me to try again. Also, I once drove my parents' car, a Renault Scenic from 2006, up to 180 kilometers per hour on the highway. I was really late to pick up some people from the airport, so I just stepped on it. That was also extremely dangerous. Story 39. Went to a racing school as a gift. Reached over 200 miles per hour. It really shows how quick your reactions have to be. Story 40. CBR 900RR with a tooth dropped on the rear sprocket to give longer legs. It was a zoom up and back down thing. I hit 180 miles per hour and it still wanted to go. Ever since that day 25 years ago, I have not gone over 100 miles per hour. Story 41. I got a 2005 Toyota Yaris up to 115 miles per hour in South Dakota, going downhill for a good few miles. Increasing speed from 100 miles per hour to 115 miles per hour took over 2 minutes. I took my Honda CBR 1000RR motorcycle to the track and reached 170 miles per hour on the straight. Then it wobbled hard while I was trying to slow down enough for the first turn, nearly causing me to lose control. I greatly prefer knee-dragging cornering to going fast in a straight line. Story 42. 135 miles per hour in a rented BMW M3 on the Autobahn between Frankfurt and Munich. The vehicle became light in the front end, just under 140 miles per hour, so we decided to slow down and maintain a gentlemanly 90 miles per hour for the rest of the trip. Note: at 125 miles per hour, we were passed by 2 people on a motorcycle. They pulled up, waved, and sped off quickly. Story 43. 135 Hayabusa motorcycles on a Tuesday just past Barstow heading to Las Vegas. The bike had plenty more. It was enough for me. Story 44. 175 miles per hour on the original Suzuki Hayabusa. Verified by radar. The fastest in a car was 150 miles per hour in a Corvette. The scariest was 135 miles per hour in a 1970s Monte Carlo on Route 17 in New York, near Walton by the Rainbow Bar. The drive shaft came through the floor. Story 45. 8 years ago, at 5:45 a.m., between Reno, Nevada, and headed for Las Vegas. 2011 Chevrolet Camaro 2SS, traveling at 163 miles per hour for 3 miles, still had revolutions per minute and throttle to the floor. Started thinking about wild burros and questioning the speed rating on the tires. Backed her down. Wish I would have maxed her out, though. Story 46. I had the cruise control set at approximately 140 miles per hour in my 1995 Volkswagen Jetta, going across the Nevada desert. I did not see another car for more than 2 hours, and the road was perfectly straight for over 100 miles. Story 47, 165 miles per hour or 266 kilometers per hour in a Dodge Challenger Street and racing technology. I was on my way to Las Vegas and found a nice straight road, then went full speed. Story 48, 158 miles per hour, tuned Nissan 240SX on a long country road that doubled as an emergency aircraft runway. Many people used to go there to perform top speed tests. You could enter the decommissioned base every few weeks and drive around the double triangle runways that the National Guard still partially maintained. Story 49, about 140 miles per hour in a 1974 Dodge Charger with bad universal joints. Shaking my head, I was 22 years old and dumb. The front end was floating badly. Story 50. The fastest I have driven is around 130 miles per hour in a 2007 Ford F-150. I was cruising along with the radio playing and did not realize I had gotten a little heavy on the accelerator, too into the music. The fastest I have ever ridden is around 180 miles per hour for a few moments. My friend and I used to go parasailing with his Audi down the tollways using a rope, parachute, and rollerblades. That was the kind of young, reckless behavior one has in their 20s. It is not quite the dumbest thing I have done, but it is up there. Story 51. I got a Ford Fiesta to hit 98 miles per hour in Alabama. I was absolutely flooring it while bombing downhill. It is definitely not the fastest I have gone in a vehicle, but it is probably my proudest achievement. Story 52. 140 miles per hour on a Ducati Monster 696, driving down a local highway in Georgia. My top speed in a car is only 110 miles per hour, but it was my mother-in-law's 1993 Honda Accord. Don't tell her. Story 53. 170 kilometers per hour. Red Fiat Panda 750 Young, 1989. Slightly downhill highway. Probably acceleration and my back sinking in the seat of an Alfa 164 for the first time made me gasp. But 170 kilometers per hour in the Panda felt like close to absolute speeding disaster. Story 54. 168 miles per hour. 2007 Jeep Grand Cherokee Street Racing Technology. Had a mild motor build, built for boost, but I never got around to boosting it before selling it. Man, what a fun vehicle that was. Story 55. 113 miles per hour. My own car, a Chevrolet Camaro. Middle of nowhere in the Upper Peninsula. Could have gone faster but decided that was plenty. Story 56. About 125 miles per hour. The speedometer was pegged in a Ford Pinto hatchback, pumpkin orange, during a road race with a Porsche on Highway 101 in Northern California. My dad was driving. It looked horrible, but the engine was one of the best they had made for the Pinto, and no one ever expected how well it could run. Story 57. 160 miles per hour. 2018 BMW M3 Touring conversion on the long Interstate 5 stretch north of Shasta, California. Should note, early morning, no cars ahead, straight road. Not trying to be reckless or put others at risk. Story 58. 125 miles per hour in a 2008 Jeep Grand Cherokee with the 3.7-liter V6 engine. 25,000 miles overdue for an oil change, with a 5x7 American flag on a pole in the hitch. I was not the driver, but it was my car. Story 59. 174 miles per hour in a Dodge Challenger Scat Pack that was modified. I was on a road trip from New York to Los Angeles. I was going through New Mexico on the way home, although from leaving upstate New York until crossing the bridge into Chicago, I did not drop below 120 miles per hour and raced one of the Hellcat Jeep vehicles across the big bridge going into Chicago. Story 60. During a severe weather event, they shut down our state's main highway except for fleeing. However, they closed it for too long and only one direction was usable. I took my Prius to the highest speed I could go once the weather was clear. When that slow monster hit about 92 miles per hour, it started shaking and became very violent to the point that I realized that was the car's maximum speed. Story 61. 100 miles per hour on my 2015 Honda Civic somewhere on either Interstate 71 or Interstate 75 highway in Kentucky a few years ago. Story 62. Like 130 miles per hour downhill in a 2007 Honda Accord. It was the six-cylinder variable valve timing and lift electronic control engine, I believe. I don't know much about cars, but I remember my car enthusiast friend saying it was a surprisingly powerful engine for what it was. Then 125 miles per hour downhill on my Honda Sabre VT 1100 C2. I miss that bike so much. Story 63. 200 kilometers per hour or 125 miles per hour on the Autobahn. It was an early 2000s BMW hatchback. It was probably unwise to drive her that fast because she was an old car and the tires were likely not rated for that speed. Oh well. Story 64. In my own experience, I ski at 100 kilometers per hour and drive a car at 150 miles per hour. Yes, I know I used kilometers per hour and miles per hour because it looks cooler. Yes, I am an adult. Story 65. 110 on Interstate 25 in New Mexico with a 2015 Subaru Legacy. I could not even believe I was going that fast. Felt like I was not going faster than 80. Story 66. 105 miles per hour when I was opening up my new Audi A6. I do not like it. I am not a risk-taking type and get my thrills elsewhere. Story 67. 135 to 140 miles per hour in my 1997 Chevrolet Camaro Z28 on Route 66 in Northern Virginia. It was 2:30 in the morning on a summer night. I got lucky that I was not caught. There are many police on that road and not many cars at that time of night. This was in 1998 or 1999. There is always traffic now. If I remember correctly, the top speed was approximately 155 miles per hour, but I got nervous to try to push it any further. The car was handling fine, but I had the top down and the wind was ferocious. The sweet spot for that car was 100 to 110 miles per hour. Felt like you were slicing through the night, driving normally with the world sped up around you. Story 68. 255 kilometers per hour. In my 1997 Chevrolet Camaro Z28. On the highway late at night between cities. A friend in his truck drove ahead and called me to let me know there was no police. I only stayed at that speed for a few seconds. Story 69. 62 miles per hour Prius 2022 Sport Mode light uphill. 147 kilometers per hour jet ski that is very fast on the water. Looking faster than 300 kilometers per hour on a bike. Story 70. 190 kilometers per hour in my dad's 1998 Mercedes CLK. My wife and I were going to see Tiger Woods play in Ireland. Dad let me borrow the car. I drove the first 70 kilometers with the roof down, got up to 150 kilometers per hour, and received a warning to close the roof. With it closed, we reached 190 kilometers per hour on the motorway. The car had more to give, but it was not mine. I reached 220 kilometers per hour as a passenger on the back of his Honda Goldwing Pan American. That was pretty intense. Story 71. 145 miles per hour on a Honda VFR 800 sports bike. On a back road with a really long straight in a small town not far from where I live now. I could have gone a bit faster but decided to back off after I hit 145 miles per hour because there were some side roads coming up where cars could enter the road, and I did not want to risk it. Story 72. I was driving at 200 kilometers per hour in my BMW 420d on the Autobahn. I would have gone faster, but my wife was already very anxious at that speed, so I slowed down. Story 73. 135 miles per hour on the 130 toll outside of Austin. It was in a base-level six-cylinder 2016 Challenger. Those hills get close at those speeds. Story 74. 170 kilometers per hour, approximately 105 miles per hour, in my Miata on the Red Bull Ring, where the Austrian Grand Prix is held. Very tame compared to the other replies. Maybe I need to get a supercharger installed or something. The car does not go much faster. Story 75. I hit a global positioning system verified 146 miles per hour in a 1998 Taurus super high output. My current car is limited to 165 miles per hour, but I am too old for such reckless behavior on public roads anymore. I have only gotten it to about 110 miles per hour before shutting it down, but it took no effort to get there. Story 76. 146 in a 2003 Mercedes C32 AMG as driver. 158 in a Ford GT as passenger. I also steered a funny car onto a trailer at 1 mile per hour and have the record for the slowest lap at the Monaco Grand Prix in a diesel rental car with the streets open after the race. Story 77. 190 kilometers per hour. Approximately 118 miles per hour. In a 2021 Subaru Impreza on a back road. I would not do it again on a road like that. It was scarier than I thought. Story 78. 116 in a 2011 Chevrolet Silverado 1500. I was going down a slight downhill and accelerated before I reached it. The speed governor activated and limited the speed. The truck did not accelerate again until I reached 92 miles per hour. Story 79. Love how many guys are typing right now before upvoting. I really did a million. No, but I maxed out a Suzuki GSX-R 600 on a highway in Florida. My speedometer said 192, but I had changed my gearing for acceleration. I only went between two exits that were 3 miles apart, and it took around a minute, so probably around 180 miles per hour. Also, my answer to what is the dumbest thing you have ever done in your life? Ask me anything. Story 80. 200 kilometers per hour. Lamborghini Gallardo Spider. On a public road, which of course is not okay. In my defense, I had no idea it would get up to that speed so fast. Story 81. 115 in my little Toyota Matrix XR. Highway between Detroit and Saginaw, Michigan. Going home from Macon 1 year. Story 82. Whatever the speed limiter was set to, approximately 120 miles per hour, on my 2010 Mitsubishi Lancer ES, Highway 151, Wisconsin, on my way to Platteville. No specific reason, just wanted to see what it could do. Story 83. Legally? Approximately 115 miles per hour on the back straight at Watkins Glen, Honda S2000. They had the bus loop open, which shortened the straight and made things a little tricky for a novice. Story 84. I reached about 110 to 115 revolutions per minute on Interstate 95 when I had a Ford Fiesta. I have only gotten to about 95 to 100 revolutions per minute in my current car, a Honda Civic Si, but I know I will push it higher someday soon. Story 85. I was hitchhiking once in the Toronto area. A guy in a red Mazda with a black hood picked me up. The car had gauges and other features. It went whoosh whoosh when he shifted gears. I am pretty sure he reached around 260 kilometers per hour while racing a Mustang down Highway 401. I was not driving, just getting to my destination faster than expected. The fastest I ever drove was 182 kilometers per hour in a Dodge Colt 1.3-liter manual transmission. After 140 kilometers per hour, the car stopped shaking and the ride became smooth. Story 86. 125 kilometers per hour. I know it is not much, but each time I step on the pedal too much, I feel my car falling apart. It is not the most reassuring for going further. Highway to Banff, Ford Escape. Story 87. Reached just over 120 miles per hour in a rented Dodge Challenger Tory Red 2019. The tires were rated for 150 miles per hour, and I had an open road, but the wheels were shaking very badly. They were slightly vibrating even at 60 miles per hour. Story 88. 153 miles per hour, 246 kilometers per hour. In 1996 in a tuned 1994 Lexus GS 400. My first nice car. This was south of Portland, Oregon, United States, on Interstate 5 heading north at around 2 a.m. I missed that car. It was a slightly older version of the GS sedan below, but in champagne gold with chrome 5-star Inkai wheels. Story 89. 135 miles per hour. 1999 Mercury Cougar V6, mildly modified, country road in Ohio at night. She had more in her, but I backed off because I was afraid I would hit a deer and disintegrate. Yes, I know it was stupid. It was before I became a father. In my defense, there was no one else on the road. I was only a danger to myself and the local deer population. Story 90. 158 miles per hour in my 2010 Mazda Speed 3, racing a Nissan 370Z up the State Route 57 freeway in Southern California like a reckless driver. I looked down at the speedometer, realized how fast I was going, and just lifted my foot off the gas. Story 91. 120 miles per hour, 193.1 kilometers per hour, briefly in a 1970 Buick Skylark Custom with a 350 cubic inch engine on Interstate 405 north of Bothell, Washington, decades ago. Story 92. 2004 Dodge Dakota V6 was able to get it up to about 175 kilometers per hour before it hit the limiter and slowed down. I thought I broke it at first. That is the first and only time I hit the limiter in any vehicle. Story 93. The speedometers on the ambulances I worked on back in the 1990s stopped at 85 miles per hour. However, the needle would keep moving past 85 through to the P in miles per hour at the bottom. Story 94. The fastest speed I reached was on a Honda CBR 600 F2, but I chickened out at 115 miles per hour. Most recently, I hit 104 miles per hour on a snowmobile across a lake. Both experiences were in Wisconsin. Story 95. I don't know exactly. I buried the speedometer that went to 125 miles per hour on Interstate 25 in Wyoming with a 1970 Dodge Charger. Story 96. 145 miles per hour, 233 kilometers per hour, on a 1999 Triumph Legend TT on the interstate. The wind popped the lenses out of my sunglasses. I do not know how fast in a 1978 Thunderbird. The speedometer only went up to 85 miles per hour, but it had no pegs to stop the needle, and I wrapped it around the dial back up to about 15 miles per hour. I would guess over 130 miles per hour, but I have no idea. That boat of a car felt like it was floating at that speed. Story 97. 140 miles per hour in a 1988 Toyota Supra, passed by a friend on a Honda CBR 1000 motorcycle doing more than 160 miles per hour. My parents bought me that Supra at a law enforcement forfeiture auction. None of us was aware how special that car was. I loved that car. Story 98. 240 kilometers per hour on my Suzuki GSX 750F. I did it legally on the Stewart Highway in the Northern Territory when they still had unrestricted speed zones in 2006. I did a standing start and shifted at the red line all the way up. The scream from that bike was glorious. Story 99. 220 kilometers per hour in a 2009 Dodge Magnum Road and Trek. That was the top of the speedometer. It felt to me like the car had plenty more to give, but I just wanted to pin the speedometer. Story 100. My friend got in huge trouble for burying the speedometer needle in the gas gauge. It stuck, and after a bunch of tapping, the speedometer would not register below 30 and acted all faulty. My friend's dad knew exactly what we did. Story 101. About 125 miles per hour. My college roommate had a 2008 Volkswagen R32 limited edition. I think they only made 5,000 of them. This was in 2012. I was driving from Denver International Airport back to Boulder after dropping him off. Story 102. Indicated speed was about 135 miles per hour in a Super Veloce Touring Lightning. The only problem was I was barely moving because of snow. The actual fastest speed was around 115 to 120 miles per hour. I am not sure how accurate my speed sensor was with the aftermarket gear replacement on my 1997 Crown Victoria after a ring and pinion change. I have had to err on the side of practicality since I was 17, so I have never owned anything that was actually fast. Story 103. 120 miles per hour. Back around 1997 or so in my 1988 Sob Spring in West Texas, heading from Austin Texas to Orange County, California. I didn't do it for long, but it was long enough for me. Story 104. About 150 miles per hour on my VFR 800 Sport Tourer. It was on a very new highway in West Virginia that basically no one was using yet. Did it once, do not need to do it again. Insane how quickly the 1/10 mile markers were going by. Story 105. 170 miles per hour in AC5 Corvette. That was my first time experiencing brake fade, and I will never let that happen again. Probably over 170 miles per hour on a Yamaha R1. This race registered at 163 miles per hour on my GPS logger, but it updated every 30 seconds. Story 106. 170 miles per hour in my Porsche 911, going west on Interstate 70 across Utah. I have a picture of the speedometer taken by my fearless co-pilot riding shotgun. Story 107. Seeing so many people talking about slow speeds makes me feel even dumber for what I used to do. I used to drive over 190 miles per hour on modified sport bikes and cars frequently. These were long, flat, empty country highways all the time. I would say I have driven over 500 miles at those speeds. Story 108. About 170 miles per hour in my friend's Corvette Z06. There was still more accelerator to press, but that was too much for me given the circumstances. I would be interested in pushing for more on a closed road with additional safety equipment. Story 109. The fastest ever was in 08 R1, which tops out going from Milan, Michigan to Plymouth, Michigan in about 14 minutes. The fastest car I have driven was a supercharged 1997 Mustang Cobra, reaching 155 miles per hour on the same road, but in the opposite direction. The fastest vehicle I have driven is my Whippled 2024 regular cab short bed Ford F-150. I have hit the speed governor at 135 miles per hour multiple times, and it is still pulling strongly at that speed. A new tune is coming soon, and I am confident I will exceed 155 miles per hour. Story 110. Outside of an aircraft, it was my Honda Civic at 130 miles per hour. Looking back, it was insanely dangerous. Now, I rarely go over 80 miles per hour on the freeway unless it is to pass. Story 111. Cousin's modified 2004 Special Vehicle Team Cobra. We hit 170 miles per hour on the straight road north of Alpine, Texas. That car was geared to nearly reach 200 miles per hour, and more than once when the Ford Grand Touring groups went cruising around the area, he would tag along just to harass them. Story 112. About 230 miles per hour in an upgraded Audi R8. Maybe faster, but I cannot remember. I have done it many times in various high-performance vehicles. Gran Turismo 6. Forza Motorsport Series. Yes, I know I get busy. Story 113. 150 miles per hour in a Jaguar XJS on a dual carriageway between Nuneaton and Bedworth in the late 1980s. A motorcycle overtook me. Story 114. Approximately 150 miles per hour in my mother's Mitsubishi Eclipse when I was 16. Could go faster, but I got scared and released the accelerator. Story 115. 120 miles per hour. 1999 Toyota Camry. That car was about to levitate. Lonely road through cornfields in Indiana. I will not do it again. Story 116. Buried the needle at 120 miles per hour in my 1974 Chevrolet Nova coming down from the mountains on Highway 285 in Colorado back in the 1990s. Story 117. 162 miles per hour in a 1967 Chevelle Super Sport 396. 4-speed. My brother re-geared it for top-end speed instead of stoplight racing. The law enforcement officer chasing me radioed ahead. You can't outrun the airwaves. To this day, I think it had more top-end speed because I only had about a 1.5-mile run before things got serious with the traffic lights. Story 118. A little reminder that public roads are not your personal playground. Do not be selfish on a thrill ride that could kill families. Story 119. 135 miles per hour twice. Once in northern Minnesota on a 2-mile stretch of freshly paved road in a national forest with no turnoffs. Four men with the top down on a Volvo C70 T5. A deer would have caused a serious accident. Again in Germany on the Autobahn in a Mercedes-Benz station wagon rental with my family. They all thought I had the car set to kilometers per hour, so they did not really notice. Motorcycles were passing us in the left lane doing what felt like double my speed. I would love to reach 140 miles per hour on a track with safety gear. Story 120. I had a rotary blower swapped Nissan 240SX that made 371 horsepower at the wheels. Driving to Watertown from Fort Drum, we timed how long it took from mile marker to mile marker and recorded just over 170 miles per hour. Aside from that, I usually hit around 140 miles per hour a few times a month in my Toyota Supra. Story 121. Approximately 140 miles per hour, Mitsubishi 3000 GT, going home in rural Gardnerville, Nevada. The shaking was enough to scare me into slowing down. Story 122. Personally, I maxed my mother's Ford Edge at 115 miles per hour. I rode in a Mustang Boss 302, and the driver slowed down at 165 miles per hour. We were 17 years old. Story 123. Back in the late 1980s, when I was 17, I had my 1973 Nova going over 120 miles per hour late one night around 2 a.m. on an empty highway. I got pulled over, but I was completely sober and honest with the officer. I told him that I just wanted to see how fast the car would go. Surprisingly, he appreciated the honesty and gave me a ticket for only 10 miles per hour over the speed limit. Story 124. In a car, it was 140 miles per hour in a 1964 Ford Mustang. On a motorcycle, it was over 150 miles per hour on my cousin's sport bike. Both times, it was on a local back road in southwest Michigan. Story 125. As a passenger on my cousin's motorcycle riding over twisting Appalachian back roads at 150 miles per hour, 1/4 of the way down a valley straightaway, I closed my eyes. We covered 20 miles in under 14 minutes, averaging 85 miles per hour through 35 miles per hour paved roads. The last mile was a dirt road up to Grandpa's place. I have never ridden there since. Story 126. 250 kilometers per hour downhill in a Ford Mondeo wagon outfitted for United States military police in Germany. Absolutely maxed it out. Story 127. 195 kilometers per hour. We were in a group and we all drove separate cars to our next destination. I somehow thought the whole group was ahead of me, so I put pedal to the metal in my 2017 Ford Focus diesel. At 195 kilometers per hour, it would not go any faster, and it also turned out the whole group was behind me. Story 128. 250 kilometers per hour in the internal combustion engine German train. Previous records. 210 kilometers per hour in a Passat B5 and later in a Skoda Octavia. And before that 170 kilometers per hour in my Golf Mark II. The latter was achieved at 1 o'clock in the morning in heavy rain and wind. I will not forget that anytime soon. Story 129. 190 kilometers per hour driving lessons on the Autobahn. Getting a license is quite hard in Germany, and 2 of the practical driving lessons take place on the Autobahn. During those lessons, I just increased my speed, and the instructor did not stop me. Nowadays, I do not drive that fast, mostly because it is expensive. Story 130. 135 miles per hour on a 2003 Harley-Davidson retired police model Road King on a 2-lane state highway. Many years before that, I was in a Pontiac Formula 400 Firebird, doing 147 miles per hour on an interstate. The Harley experience just felt a lot faster. Story 131. 2001 Lexus LS 430. I was on Interstate 285 in Atlanta when I was 17. I hit 130 miles per hour without pushing the car too hard. I did not realize it could so easily reach those speeds and have not gone more than 10 miles per hour over speed limit since. Super cool 4.3-liter V8 for a small sedan. Story 132. 115 miles per hour in a 1993 Toyota Camry in 2006 on an empty stretch of an interstate. I only ever did it the one time. I enjoyed the experience but have not felt the need to do it again. Story 133. Over 250 kilometers per hour, heavily modified and built Nissan Skyline R32 GTR, on a 30-kilometer stretch of public road that a billionaire constructed for racing cars. I do not have an exact figure because the needle on the speedometer went beyond the maximum limit. Story 134. 135 miles per hour, Honda Civic hatchback south of Tucson, Arizona, heading to the New Mexico border. The car had more to give, but I stopped thinking about police. Story 135. Personally driven. I think 116 miles per hour in a Ford Taurus on an old empty 2-lane highway. I could see up ahead for miles. Story 136. 115 miles per hour in a 1989 Ford Taurus SHO on a county road. There were never any police on those old county roads, and that SHO had some power. I missed that car. It was probably my favorite car I ever owned. Story 137. 155 miles per hour at Road America, Wisconsin, in a BMW M3, but surprisingly, 142 miles per hour in my 2016 Subaru WRX in 2022. Story 138. 150 miles per hour on a Kawasaki Ninja 650. I was only wearing jeans, a short-sleeve polo, and a pair of boots, no helmet. Yes, I am an idiot and lucky to be alive. This was 20 years ago. I have family now and would never dream of such stupidity again. It was down a very long, straight backcountry road that saw hardly any traffic aside from residents, on a Sunday. Not that I would have seen a car if it had pulled onto the road going that fast with no helmet. It makes me feel like a complete moron every time I think about it. Story 139. 140 miles per hour in my 2019 GMC Acadia on a slight downhill. I do not have any idea why, but I am not sure any of the GMC Acadias have reached that speed before. Story 140. My ex-husband and I took turns driving, and we had an old-school GPS attached to the windshield. I think I went 120 kilometers per hour. He was at 140 kilometers per hour. There was not a car in sight for a few hours. Story 141. Clocked at 150 miles per hour when I was slowing down in a 1998 Mark III VR6 supercharged Grand Tourer injection. 155 miles per hour in a 2008 Audi S4. Story 142. 140 miles per hour in a 1971 Buick Skylark on a rare paved, level, straight stretch of Forest Service Road around Winthrop, Washington, United States. My brother bought the car at a public auction for $50. The car had previously been used as a dirt track race car, complete with larger profile tires on the right side and a twisted frame. After a few days of fluid and filter changes, cleaning, and fine-tuning, we decided to take it out and test its limits. I had never driven over around 100 miles per hour before, and in a much newer car. 140 miles per hour in the Skylark was like scratching an itch I did not know I had. We frequently bought cars at public and police auctions, fixed and altered them, then flipped them for a significant profit or raced them. The nearby Boeing campus is so massive they have a fleet of on-site only-use pickup trucks, and I assume other vehicles. Like many police departments, they retire trucks at a certain mileage regardless of condition. Back in the early 2000s, you could buy a late 1980s to mid-1990s Dodge, Toyota, or Mazda 1/2-ton pickup for as low as $50 opening bid if there were no other bidders. My brother bought several of these to use as his own little work truck fleet and some for spare parts. Story 143. My favorite is not necessarily my fastest. I nearly had a heart attack when I hit the speed limiter on my 1987 Chevrolet K10, 98 miles per hour, and I thought the entire engine was shaking under the truck. Everything returned to normal once I slowed back to 95 miles per hour. Luckily, the truck had brown seats. Story 144. Nice try 50. I will say this 148 in a 2018 Ford Focus Saint. I put my foot into this car wondering where the governor was set. I didn't believe it didn't have one. My biggest surprise was when I shut it down, I could smell the tires. Loved that car. Story 145. a month after I bought my 2005 Chrysler 300C. I was on the highway when a guy on a bike pulled out and zipped past. For fun, I chased him. It was fun and games until I hit the speed control limit of 200 kilometers per hour. The car accelerated like a freight train until it lost power repeatedly. It was very disappointing. Once I knew I was limited to below 200 kilometers per hour, I never tried to go faster again. Story 146. 147 miles per hour Toyota Celica GT blacked out. Interstate in South Carolina. Slow rolling hills. Midnight. Empty lanes. We used to do it for fun. There was another road nearby where many people sped, a rural area with lots of straight roads around farms. However, many people died on that road due to a deceptive dip into a turn that took people out regularly. Story 147. I had a 1992 Z24 six-cylinder Cavalier. I reached 155 miles per hour. After a mile or so, you notice the back feels like it is floating. It is a front-wheel drive. The fastest was a 2015 435i. Between El Paso and Abilene, where the speed limit is 80 miles per hour, I drove about 160 miles per hour for 100 miles. I tested the car in different areas as I drove it between Dallas and San Diego about 3 to 4 times a year. Story 148. 119 miles per hour in an old 5-cylinder 2004 Chevrolet Colorado work truck. I do not know how the thing did not fall apart. Story 149. 250 kilometers per hour in a Volkswagen Golf R. I could not go faster because an Audi TT was parked in the left lane, and I could not get past. Story 150. 131 miles per hour in my 1984 Corvette. I was passed by a screaming motorcycle going at least 5 to 10 miles per hour faster on Highway 395 in the Mojave Desert north of Adelanto, California. Story 151. 98 miles per hour. 2015 Chevrolet Equinox. I was on my way home from a friend's house at 2 a.m. between Washington, Pennsylvania, and Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, on Route 79. Story 152. 175 miles per hour 2006 SRT-8 Charger. A long time ago on an undisclosed highway. Would not recommend. The front end becomes very light. Teenagers are reckless. Story 153. 180 miles per hour in a rental Lamborghini Gallardo. It happened about 12 years ago in Toronto on Highway 407, but I did not intend to go that fast. I did not realize the car was in miles per hour. Story 154. Passenger, not driver, traveling at about 150 miles per hour in my buddy's souped-up Audi S4. Also a passenger in a BMW regular station wagon on the Autobahn that reached up to 240 kilometers per hour. It didn't feel as fast as the Audi, so I think the speedometer might have been off. Story 155. I was driving 130 miles per hour in a Mini Cooper about a week before a catastrophic oil leak led me to sell the car for a low price. Story 156. 145 miles per hour in a Chrysler Crossfire on a desert highway southeast of Palm Springs near Blythe. That little car was a rocket. It could have gone faster, but I chickened out. Story 157. 160 kilometers per hour in my 1969 Datsun 100 with an A15 motor and single downdraft Webers. I was dragging a Commodore VL Turbo from the lights, kept up for over 300 meters, then it peeled away. Story 158. East Texas, a little north of Jasper. I was cruising at 120 miles per hour in my grandfather's old Nissan Titan. I missed that truck. Story 159. My team and I designed and built a 2000 Corvette for Salt Flatland speed racing. I drove it and reached 214.3 miles per hour at Bonneville. The goal was to break 200 miles per hour, and we were very happy to surpass that while keeping the car intact. Story 160. Hit 151 miles per hour in a BMW X5 and immediately backed off. At around 6,500 pounds, it handled like a flying brick. Divided highway late at night with no other cars. Story 161. Lexus LFA. 180 miles per hour on a track. Fun. But afterward I got some bad anxiety thinking about how it could have gone very wrong. Story 162. As a passenger, 167 miles per hour on the back of a bus. As a driver, 153 miles per hour on the Autobahn with a Mercedes-Benz C63S AMG. Braking at that speed is twitchy. Story 163. Driving down the Autobahn at 190 kilometers per hour, or 120 miles per hour, in a Nissan 200SX at night was legal but probably not a good idea. Story 164. My poor driving skills resulted in only reaching 165 kilometers per hour in my 2012 Ford Focus. I was afraid of getting pulled over and losing my license, which I had just obtained a few months earlier. I decided that accidentally losing my life or harming someone else is not worth the thrill. Story 165. Maybe around 220 kilometers per hour in my Audi A6 here in Germany, and maybe 250 to 260 kilometers per hour in my brother's Mustang, but not in my own car. But I tell you what, the fastest I felt was going 100 kilometers per hour in my Miata. Story 166. Supposedly, although I am not sure about the accuracy, I hit 134 miles per hour in a rented Pontiac G6 around 2006 on a clear stretch of freeway near St. Louis, Missouri. Also, I recently hit 112 miles per hour in my current car, a 2014 Chevrolet Equinox, on a nice straight stretch of a toll road on the way back from the coast. The last one was many years before the other two. It was almost an impossibility for the car in that particular configuration. A 1986 Honda CR-XHF, the high fuel efficiency model, weighed 200 pounds less curb weight than the SI model the next year, tipping the scales at just over 1,600 pounds. It had a 1.5-liter four-cylinder engine, no air conditioning, a standard shift, and a somewhat unusual transmission. The gear ratio was quite different from more typical Honda offerings. The redline was 5,500 revolutions per minute, whereas most others were between 6,000 and 6,500 at the time. First gear at redline would do 37 miles per hour. Second gear at redline was 78 miles per hour. Third gear was 105 miles per hour. Fourth and fifth gears were just overdrive. The problem was that 1.5-liter engine only produced about 63 horsepower. The SI model was around 95 horsepower. One night, on a deserted road outside of town that was a bit hilly, I spun it up as fast as I could going to the top of a slightly higher hill and pushed it as hard as it would go downhill. I got about 105 miles per hour out of it, but not in third gear because it ran out of torque before then. I think I got to about 98 to 100 miles per hour in third gear before it quit pulling, and downhill in fourth gear got me to 105 miles per hour. The high fuel efficiency was not a joke either. The city mileage was not as good because you would lug the engine to get the purported 50 miles per gallon in town. There was a shift light on the dashboard telling you when to upshift to the next gear for optimal fuel economy, but that would have you going 25 miles per hour in fifth gear with barely idle revolutions per minute of 750. On the freeway, though, it was better. It was supposed to get 50 miles per gallon in town and 55 on the highway. It might have even done more than 55 miles per gallon on the freeway, as I never did any precise calculations to figure out what I was getting. Also, I rarely got on the freeway where I could really drive for a full tank and see where I would end up. Most of my driving was in town with quick starts, quick stops, traffic, corners, and rarely getting out of third gear. I still managed to get around 30 miles per gallon. I still wish I had that car. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.